I welcome you, Justin, and hopefully our audience tonight to our webinar. Tonight we're having a conversation with Justin Parmenter from Charlotte Mecklenburg Public School System. He is a public school middle school teacher. We're really thrilled to have you here, Justin. You came in October to our conference and you were a big hit. You had a lot of really important things to say in a very small period of time. And we told everyone at the conference that we were going to schedule some individual webinars with all the presenters after the conference to have more deeper conversation and give you more of an opportunity to talk about some of the challenges in your school district and some of the creative ways that you've been dealing with it. So, for folks who didn't get to join us on October the 12th, I hope they'll go to our website, publicschoolsfirst.org, and look under conference, because we still have a tape recording of the entire conference, and so you can catch up later if you didn't get it. And we were also, Justin, so you'll know later, we're going to be posting your webinar later tonight and that same web page so that we can share this with our audience. But we want to go ahead tonight and thank everybody for coming and to get started. And Justin, just to remind some folks about you. You are, as I said a few minutes ago, a 7th grade language arts teacher at Waddell Language Academy in Charlotte, North Carolina. You began your teaching career as a Peace Corps volunteer in Albania and later taught in Istanbul, Turkey, and on the White Mountain Apache Reservation in Arizona. Now, look, I could just talk to you all night about that. About the Peace Corps work, and about what you did in Turkey, and about working on the reservation in Arizona. So I may have to have you back one day just to talk about that experience and how it shaped you as a teacher today, because it had to have a lot of influence on you.
Oh yeah, and it's my favorite thing to talk about, and every single one of those steps in the journey has kind of shaped the perspective that I have now, and it really gives me just an interesting lens to view my current work through, for sure.
Right, and so I got to know you through some work you've done with Red for Ed. I've got to know you through Public Schools First. I've also been a follower of your writing on Chalkboard. I encourage everybody, as we move forward with our webinar tonight, I hope they'll go back and take a look at some of the things that you've contributed to the Post, to the US Today Education Week. And I think that I appreciate your thoughtfulness in terms of how you look at the issues facing not just the classroom teacher, but you really often talk about leadership we need in the public school system at the principal level, superintendent. And you've also been an excellent role model of talking to parents about how to support their kids. Some of the projects you've done have been remarkable. So we'll move on. But as I said, I think we could spend a lot of time talking about the career that you've had so far. But let's get now to what we began talking about at the conference, which was school privatization and how that impacts us in terms of segregation by race and class and these things. And Justin, I might let you have just a few minutes before we get going to talk about your view of this whole thing about privatization, because a lot of people still ask me weekly, I swear, well, I'm not quite sure how this is working. What do you mean by privatizing our schools? How is this done, and why does it matter? Mm-hmm. What's going on? And so I've tried to do our little slide here. It's just a brief taste of it in some of the ways it's going on, but maybe you would like to lend your thoughts to this whole movement.
Yeah, so I mean, I like to think of it in real simple terms, and that is that for me, and I think for a lot of people, education is a human right. And when we introduce the profit motive into the equation, I think that there's a lot of ways that it can all go wrong at that point. And so I think that it's just really important to keep business and profit separate from our efforts to educate our children, because I feel like it's certainly a constitutional right. I believe it's a human right that they have to the best education that we can provide for them. And I think we need to keep that separate from profit motives.
Right, and so that's really what a lot of people are very concerned about with vouchers with charter schools that are owned for profit organizations, many of them outside of our state. And then some of the things we listed here are ways that the movement have been helped, right? You start off by offering ways for parents to leave the school system. And often many of these ways here, as you see, are ways that are not very accountable to the taxpayer or to the parent or, at all. We start grading our schools. We'll talk about that later, but we're putting scarlet letters on our school system and grading them, again, to undermine the confidence that parents have in our teachers and in our public school systems. We've had these takeover schemes that have never worked anywhere in the country, and yet North Carolina is right in the middle of one. And then the thing I hope that at some point before you get off tonight, the webinar tonight, the biggest tragic thing that I think has happened is the impact on the professionalism of teaching and the disruption of the teacher pipeline, discouraging teachers from coming into the profession and pushing them out with some of the actions, because a strong public school system depends on who stands in the front of every classroom, in my view. So maybe we'll get a chance to weave that in here as we go along tonight. And, you know, I threw some slides in here at the beginning of all our conversations just to look at just charters alone, which is one of the biggest choice vehicles to leave the public school system right now. And you can see that, you know, they were pretty small level for many years because they had a cap on them. The cap comes off and away we go. So just kind of sharing that with the public. And this is another look at the funding. I mean, look at the cumulative funding that we've put into the charter school movement in the last 20 years. It's remarkable. Nearly $6 billion.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of taxpayers' dollars for things that haven't necessarily really yielded a lot of results. But let's move back to Charlotte, Mecklenburg, where you're at. You've been there since 2002, is that correct?
That's right, yeah. I started in 2002. The year that I started at a Title I school called James Martin Middle School. And, you know, I didn't know anything at all about, I guess, the policy landscape in North Carolina at the time. But apparently that was the summer that voluntary desegregation had ended. There was no busing anymore. There had been a lawsuit, you know, I've learned since, to discontinue that practice. And, you know, all I knew was that I was in, all of a sudden, in the largest middle school in the state, a school that was highly segregated. You know, and it's taken me a while to learn kind of what the history was of education here in Charlotte and patterns of racial and economic segregation in North Carolina. But that's how I started, and I spent a few years working at that school, starting in 2002.
Mm-hmm. And so here's a beginning look at what's going on in Charlotte. Mm-hmm. You've got almost 17,000 students who've been pulled out of your classes.
Right.
So talk to us about how this feels and what this is doing to your school system.
Well, I mean, it's, you know, I think we've got 147 or 148,000 in Charlotte Mecklenburg schools. So it's, you know, it's well over 10% of our student population. It'd be interesting to see data for, you know, I would guess that the trend looks very similar to what you showed earlier in terms of funding, with that big jump after the cap was lifted. But, you know, we're seeing trends of segregation increase. I believe Charlotte Mecklenburg is you know, the most segregated district in the state. We've got a lot of charters in our county that are highly segregated also by race and by socioeconomic status. And it seems like we've really gotten away from what the original intent was of the charter school legislation that was passed in 1996. I actually have that legislation in front of me, and is it okay if I read a little bit of that?
Oh, I wish you would, yes.
Yeah, so this is House Bill 955, which was passed in, it was the Charter Schools Act of 1996. And Section A is lays out the purpose of charter schools in North Carolina, and it says, among other things, it says the purpose is to increase learning opportunities for all students with special emphasis on expanded learning experiences, to encourage the use of different and innovative teaching methods, to expand choices in the types of educational opportunities that are available. So, you know, what stands out to me is that according to the legislation, the original intent was to provide an opportunity for students that was significantly different from the alternatives that they already had within the traditional public school system. You know, a completely different curriculum, or a highly specialized course of study. And, you know, that I wasn't here in 1996. That may or may not have been true at the time. I can tell you that it's not very true now. You know, without calling out individual schools on that list that you showed. For the most part, the new schools that are opening, the new charter schools that are opening now are not very unique at all in terms of what they provide. We're at the point now with our charter policy in North Carolina where, you know, just about anybody who wants a charter is able to get one. And so I think we've gotten
Well,
pretty
we can look
far.
at the name of Mountain Island Day School, Cone Classical, Charlotte STEM,
Right,
Leadership Academy,
right.
Classical, you know, another STEM program, a lab, another STEM, another. So I don't see anything here, even by title of these schools. Of course, we don't know all the details, but I think it's really interesting. I was here in 1996. I will share with you that a lot of the conversation around the charter experiment was to be an experiment. First of all, it was to be, let's try something. It was actually advocated by teachers, a lot of teachers who said, you know, we have so many restrictions on what we can do in the classroom. We're so buttoned down all the time. We would like an opportunity, some way that we can go off outside of the rules you don't want to change, and the slack you don't want to give, or the loosening up of some of the processes you don't want to do. We want to try some things that we think are kind of innovative. We think that might improve instruction. We'd like to see about the time we start, the time we end, how many hours. We want to look at different strategies for teaching math. You know, the teachers had, and some of the educational advocates had some thoughtful things to say. And it was to be a true experiment. And it was to be a way that we'd say, maybe we won't have any sports, you know, or any of these things. Instead, we'll focus on academics in these languages, right?
Right.
We'll focus on that. So it started off with a kind of a nice, warm feeling about it. Like maybe this was a way that we could give educators some opportunity to do some things.
Yeah.
And I never did understand why we couldn't do that within the public school system.
Right.
You know, but this notion came up that was pushed through. Now we know a lot of reform education models from ALEC. And so someone picked up on it, brought it to and said, oh, well, charter schools, this is the solution. We'll have some charter schools. And like you said, the cap was on there for a long time. And until that cap was removed, there were still a lot of problems, though, because I never saw the intent of the charter school really come to fruition for the majority of the charters. Even when it was capped at 100, we still had some charters that were struggling, that weren't doing so well, that were not doing anything innovative, to be fair. And now we just have lots more of them. So
something else interesting that happened right around the same time that the cap was lifted. This law was amended in 2013. You probably know this. Originally, the law read, within 1 year after the charter school begins operation, the population of the school shall reasonably reflect the racial and ethnic composition of the general population residing within the local school administrative unit in which the school is located. That language was amended in 2013, and now instead of reading within 1 year, the population must reasonably reflect, it reads that the charter school must make efforts to reasonably reflect the racial and ethnic composition of the general population.
You
and
just need to say you
how
tried.
are you going to measure making efforts? So the law was watered down, and I think that's when we started to see, the patterns of segregation really take off.
Right, and I would say that even though you have a valid question, like what would you have to say you've done to prove you've made an effort?
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen anyone be asked to prove it.
Right.
I've never seen any report or any school or charter board meeting in which they said, oh, by the way, Justin, as the operator of this program, could you show it with us what you've tried to do to make sure that you had a fair opportunity for all children in your county to attend the school and to keep it diverse? Not going on. So what are you guys doing in Charlotte that rest of us can learn a lot from? Because, parents do want an opportunity to experience some unique opportunities for their kids on an occasion.
Right. Well, so I think, the things that I read out of that original law, calling for innovative approaches to learning, calling for, parents to be provided with opportunities that they don't already have. I think that we can accomplish those goals while at the same time maintaining a high level of accountability, while at the same time working towards, the racial and economic integration that we should be working towards in our society by focusing on magnet programs. And I'm actually a product of the magnet program in St. Louis City Public Schools many, many years ago. I was a child who grew up in the county right outside the city limits. A white student in the county. My family didn't have a lot of money, but at the time there was a thriving desegregation program in St. Louis that had come about as a result of some federal anti-discrimination lawsuits in the 70s. And so this system of desegregation had been built in St. Louis where, white students from the county were transported into the city to go to schools, and, students from the city were transported out to the county to go to schools, and it worked really well. So I went to a college prep school called Metro High School. Prior to that, I had, been attending schools that were not very diverse at all, and surrounded with people who looked just like me, and never really had an opportunity to have friends that didn't look like me. And so it was just a completely, it was a huge change for me in my life, and it was a really important shift, I guess, in my understanding of the world, just to be in a classroom with that kind of reflected what the world actually looks like, and not just what my own little neighborhood looks like.
Right.
So it was a great experience for me. I got a fantastic education there. Was really prepared well to continue my education after that and launch my teaching career. So it was a highly rigorous college prep program. That was the specialty that they had. An open campus that resembled kind of the university experience, and the goal was to try to prepare kids, especially kids who did not have a lot of family members that had attended college, for what the realities of university life would be like. And now, 30 years later, I find myself working at a magnet school in Charlotte. And the school I work at is called Waddell Language Academy. It's one, as you can see there on the graphic, of 67 magnet schools that we have, which are full magnets. And we've got 97 magnet programs in the district, some of them being partial magnets, which are, located within neighborhood schools. And the themes that we have, you talk about innovative approaches to learning. We have everything from Montessori to STEM. We have visual and performing arts. We have leadership schools, IB, early colleges. The school that I work at is a foreign language immersion school.
Wow.
All of our programs all together serve, I think it's 25,000. Yeah, there it is right there. More than 25,000 students in the county out of, I guess, a total of 147,000. So, and it's a part of our district that we're growing and trying to expand those opportunities. I think on the next slide you see a map which shows how they're spread out throughout the county. So you can see there are some holes, but we've been, as a district, I believe we've been pretty deliberate about trying to position those in the county so that you know, there's equitable access to those opportunities. It's a very large county, so you know we've got a lot of corners to reach, but as you can see there, we've got a pretty good spread in terms of our magnet programs.
I think this is really, I have to comment and say, this is really well done. When I look at Wake County, we are not doing as good a job on distributing geographically these opportunities. I think that's a key thing to consider for school systems as they're looking at ways to keep their market share and to have rigorous, robust programs, but giving parents some opportunities to pick things that they think match their kids' talents. This is remarkably spread out. I've never seen this map.
Right, right.
It's pretty impressive.
And you know, I think there has been some criticism of magnet programs as being, you know, kind of along the same lines as charters, as being used as vehicles for white flight sometimes. And Charlotte Mecklenburg a few years ago put in place a lottery system which awards seats in magnet schools using SES as a marker for admission, so that we're awarding seats, you know, based on 5 factors, and those factors are income, family structure, home ownership, English language ability, and then the highest educational attainment of an adult in the home. So seats are awarded at a proportion of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, low, medium, and high SES. You know, so our goal is that we're making sure that we're offering those opportunities aren't all just snatched up by privileged families, but that they're opportunities that, as much as possible, are available to, you know, all of our students in the district. That's the goal. My understanding is we're one of very few districts in the country which uses SES in awarding magnet seats. So
how do you think it's working? I mean, are the parents in the community, are they responding in a positive way? Are your enrollments up? Or your waiting list pretty decent?
We've got a lot of interest in our programs. You know, I can only speak to the waiting list at the school that I'm at, but we've always got a pretty deep waiting list. They're actually they've just broken ground on another language immersion school that they're building in the northern part of the county, using money that was approved in a bond a couple years back to expand those opportunities to even more students. So yeah, it's the interest is really high. And I have to say that, you know, for me, working in that school, having classes where I have, you know, students who come from very wealthy, privileged families, you know, politically powerful or financially influential families who are, you know, seated, or we're working in small groups side by side with students who come from very difficult backgrounds, who you know haven't had those kind of privileges in their lives. And so we've got such a mix of people, and somehow you know we managed to make it work. So I believe it's something, you know, it's a model that I think I would like to see in a lot more places.
I have one little question for you. In Wake County, you know, we've had a lot of areas in our county where in a somewhat couple decades back, perhaps, we saw families leaving the area, moving out further and further out into the county, and left a lot of our schools as high poverty and primarily schools with children of color. Now, so our magnet program has been set up to pull middle income and white families back into those schools to keep them from being closed or shut down or lessened in terms of their program offerings. And that's a little bit of a different approach, it seems like, from looking at your map. Are y'all kind of doing both? Are you also trying to make sure that you're bringing families, into low-income areas or into predominantly white areas? Are you trying? I mean, what is the reality of what's going on the ground there? Because in Wake County, our magnets have primarily, and that's changing, but a big chunk of our magnets are inside the core of the city, and where they're struggling to have membership and they're struggling to keep them diverse.
Yeah.
So the goal of the magnet is to offer a special program to the point that we can attract middle class, middle income, white families back into historically African American and Latinx communities. Is that at all going on in Charlotte?
I think we've been fairly successful at addressing that issue through our magnet programs, but I mean the privatization movement and the the list of charters that we saw on that earlier slide. I mean, it's that I think that is kind of working against us in a lot of ways, as we have families who who would be great candidates for programs like the ones we have that are tempted into a school that's not very diverse for whatever reason they may have for going there. So I think that it's all kind of part of the same conversation.
So in the charter schools you have in Charlotte, are they primarily segregated by race? Are the charters either serving middle class families or low income families or white families or families? From what you know about the charters, are they adding to the segregation?
Absolutely, yeah. They're primarily we've got charters that are primarily low income students of color, and then we've got charters that are primarily high income, especially white and in some cases Asian students, more wealthy students from wealthier families. So it's absolutely contributing to the problem.
Okay, well, I know you want to talk about your school.
I do. Yeah. So the way that this school works is like I mentioned before. It's seats are awarded through a magnet program. We've got 4 language programs. We have Chinese, Japanese, German, and French. And so parents, we have parents who come in and inquire very early on because they're so excited about their children getting into this program. We've had parents who are expecting come in and ask when their baby hasn't yet been born can get on a waiting list. And so these 5-year-olds are enrolled in whichever program they've landed in, and from day one it's a full immersion program. So they're studying math and they're studying science and social studies in whatever that language is.
Wow.
They are extremely confused at first. But 5-year-olds are confused about a lot of things, and so they adjust quickly, and they're very adaptable, I think, at that age, and so they just soak up the language like a sponge. And by the time the first semester break rolls around, you can go into a classroom. I've been in this Japanese kindergarten classroom and just seen students who are able to hold, to respond to questions in Japanese, to hold at that age, kind of simple mini conversations in Japanese. But by the time they get to 2nd and 3rd grade, it's incredible how advanced their language skills are. And it's interesting, our students take the same state tests that everyone else does. And so, they begin taking the reading EOG and the math EOG in 3rd grade, just like everyone else in North Carolina does. Initially, their scores are a little bit lower just because they don't have the intensive background in English that their peers in other schools have, because so much of their time has been spent in that target language. But we see those scores quickly rebound as they get older and spend a little bit more time in English literacy classes. And by the time they leave the program, their scores are well above the state average. So it's a great program. We've got exchange programs that students are able to be a part of. I have students who are who just got back from 2 weeks in China. I've got other students who are leaving for Germany right after Thanksgiving break. And so it's a really special program. And we talk about providing opportunities to not just to one segment of our our community, but to all segments. And I've got I can think of so many examples of families that I've heard talk about how this experience of going through this program has just completely changed what their child thought would be possible in their life. And I think that's what education is really supposed to do, is open up a world of opportunities to our children, and just and let them know that they have what it takes to to do whatever they want to with their lives, and these are some of the opportunities that are available to you.
So when these kids leave 8th grade, where do they go next? What's a typical path for them?
Yeah, so we have most of our students go to South Mecklenburg High School. There's a continuation of the program there. As they get older, there are a lot more curricular requirements. So they're not studying, and even in middle school where I teach, they're no longer studying, math entirely in Chinese or German. They're still studying their language, but we've got to also get a lot of other requirements taken care of. So that's also true in high school.
Mm-hmm.
They do continue to study the language that they've become fluent in at a high level, and they're able to continue it in that degree. But there's not like a full immersion high school that they're a part of.
But the high school has these 4 languages
Yes.
available
Yes.
to keep taking the classes and keep mastering.
That's right.
The language. And have you had any evidence yet of how some of these kids, when they leave high school and go to college, are they passing foreign language requirements easily? Are they testing out of the language requirement? Have you heard any anecdotal information about that?
Well, I mean, we've got,
like if you spent K through 8 in a program like this,
yeah.
and then you were able to continue your language study in high school, my goodness, what a gift this would be.
Right. And so I mean, they in most cases they have no trouble at all. And I think they're a lot of times it's a struggle for them to find an instructor that's able to challenge them at the level, especially when they're, I think in some cases with peers that are not quite as advanced, from other that are coming through other schools. But we have a lot of students who end up going to college overseas, to go into German universities or universities in France or in Japan, that are able to continue their studies in that language, and in a lot of cases end up working for companies that are headquartered in those places that are looking for Americans or other people who are fluent in English and also in whatever that language of commerce is, and where the headquarters is. So it's incredible the doors that it opens. And I just I get back to what we started out talking about. I mean, I think that if you want to say that our goal is to provide something different for our children, then I can't think of a much better example. And I can talk all night about Waddell Language Academy. This is just one of many programs, of dozens of programs that we have.
Yeah.
And all of them providing something special to the children, and also all of them part of our traditional public school system, where we are serving children with disabilities. We're providing transportation. We're providing lunches to children who who qualify for that level of support, and that's what education is supposed to be.
Well, Justin, how do we get this message out to parents who are making these choices about the short and the long-term impact of choices? If we say the common good doesn't matter, I mean, I'm looking out for my kid, and as if it has no impact on your kid. How do we help us share what your thoughts are? You've been doing this a long time. What kind of narrative should we try to use with parents? I mean, here's a great example of choice within the public school district that's vibrant and exciting, and you've got people, getting in line and applying for lotteries to get in. How do we share all this information better with parents? Because the other side is out there pushing choice for the sake of choice, parents for educational freedom. And how do we counter those messages?
Yeah, well, I think we just need to do a better job of marketing the opportunities that we have. And I think some of that has to come from the district level. Charlotte Mecklenburg does a fantastic job. We've got a thriving magnet office, but I know a lot of districts don't have the resources to do quite that level of marketing in terms of producing materials and online resources and that kind of thing to push out to parents so they know the opportunities that are there. I think we also have to talk about the results that our schools are getting and make sure that people really understand that this idea that that the free market will, that eventually, if we just provide as much choice as possible, the successful programs are going to rise to the top, and it's just sort of all going to sort itself out like it does in the business world. We're not really seeing things play out the way that we've been told they're going to. And so I think we have to keep looking at the results that we're getting and looking at data that shows what's happening to our, the academic outcomes that our students are getting, and to the patterns of segregation that we're seeing in our state, and keep having those crucial conversations about, are we doing what's in the best interest of our children?
Well, and Justin, I would make this argument. It's one thing to say we're going to have 5 pizza shops and when the best pizza shop's going to win. And guess what? That's private investment into that people are making to set up their pizza shop. And if it doesn't work and the best pizza shop wins out and some pizza shops close down, we really haven't wasted the public tax dollar.
Right.
When we're talking about our school system, we're talking about taking public tax dollars and putting it into an experiment or into an unmonitored business opportunity without any way to recover that money for the taxpayers. And we're not talking about pizza, right? We're talking about kids.
We're talking about kids, and if we are putting our children who absolutely need us to provide them with the opportunities to be successful in a program that is not going to give them what they need, then the long-term ramifications are really serious. So it's a conversation that we need to keep having, and we need to keep pushing our policymakers also to revisit this idea of having just an uncapped system where we're spreading basically the same number of dollars over a thinner and thinner and thinner. And you mentioned the original back in the 90s where teachers were kind of gung-ho about this idea. I think we've really gotten to a place where as educators we feel like we're fighting over this dwindling pile of resources, and that idea that we can even afford to just experiment is so foreign to me now as a teacher in 2019. It's just we don't have the resources that we need for the most basic needs in our schools, and so I think we really got to take a close look at what having an uncapped charter system in our state is really doing to us.
And do you have any suggestions for, as a parent and as an educator, and you're looking at this landscape, what do you think we should be doing to, short of, if we're going to have charters, what should we be doing? I think you just said put the cap back on. That's something a lot of people have said, take a break, do a moratorium. Let's really look at what we're doing. Any other thoughts you have on how parents can get involved in paying attention to this issue?
Well, you asked what else I thought we should be doing besides putting the cap back on. I think that we really need to be intentional about how we ensure integration in those schools. We've got this SES method that I mentioned before, but I think really, with the way the law was watered down in 2013, to give schools a way out so that they don't have to be intentional about integrating their populations, I really think that needs to go in the opposite direction, and that we need to look at the trends that we have and ensure that that our schools are really representative of, like in Mecklenburg County. I mean, we have such a diverse county. We really need to have schools that capture that diversity as well.
And one of the other changes that happened recently, a couple years ago, Justin, is that used to, if a charter school wanted to add a grade, they'd have to come back and amend their application and go back to the charter school board and to add a grade and hopefully make a case for we want to have fifth grade now. And here's why. We've been doing so great with grade K through 4, and we want to have this. Now the law was changed so that they can add a grade a year without coming back to the charter board at all. So they can start off with K5 and they can add sixth grade, seventh grade, and they can keep adding, moving their kids up, and they don't ever have to come back to the charter board and show or explain or request at all. And so we really loosened up the reins on this process. I think there is some irony here when we look 20 years back, in that we had educators saying, give us an opportunity to try some new things and to innovate and to have some flexibility. And now we see that our public school teachers across these 115 school districts, over the last 20 years, have gotten fewer and fewer and fewer opportunities to be flexible and to be innovative, less funding, more restrictions on their own evaluations, more restrictions on the resources in their schools, calendar restrictions, class size restrictions. We've seen that the flexibility has been growing in the charter school area and decreasing in our traditional public schools. That's kind of ironic. One of the things about charter schools that I've always found a little daunting if I were a parent is that they're not required to have but half of their teachers be certified.
Right.
I like the certification process. I mean, tell us why that matters. I mean, what does it mean to be a certified teacher?
Well, it's a difficult job, and so I think we want to ensure that the person who's standing in front of that group of 25 young people who are depending on, and whose parents are depending on him or her to know what they're doing and to be able to, grow them a year's worth of growth in that year, that they are actually going to be able to do that. It's not a job that anybody who has been around children is qualified to do. And so absolutely, I can tell you as a parent, I don't want a teacher who's not certified spending a year teaching my child, because it's a year that they will never get back.
Right.
And so
that is so true. That's why I'm saying about the pizza shop. The pizza shop closes down, so you don't have a pizza shop on that corner anymore. As charter school closes down, the child has lost all of these opportunities. We've seen across North Carolina, even in the last couple of years, charter schools who have closed abruptly. They've gone bankrupt. They've left town. We see where there's been accusations of fraud. And all I think about when I hear these stories is not the tax dollars wasted, although that's important. I think about the hopes and dreams of the parents who put those kids together. And I think it's really interesting that our leaders don't think that they're responsible, that the charter school board don't feel responsible when a school is charged with fraud, or someone at the school is charged with misconduct that impacted children, that we don't feel that we are part of that problem, that we have a responsibility. It's really amazing. Well, I do want to give a little bit of opportunity for a few other questions on some other things. And Justin, the one thing I want to get you to talk about just a few minutes, because I do have you on here and you are a wonderful thinker. I am concerned about this issue of teacher pipeline. I'm very concerned about it. Can you tell the audience a little bit about what's going on in our schools of education and what's going on in our schools, and what we need to do to turn some of this around?
Well, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I believe it's something like a decline of 30% over the last 6 or 7 years in enrollment in our teacher prep programs in the University of North Carolina system. It's no mistake that over that same period of time, we've seen a significant deprofessionalization of teaching in North Carolina. We've lost, teachers have lost due process. We've lost additional pay for advanced degrees. The salaries have been frozen for long periods of time. Veteran teachers haven't seen, any action on their salaries in a long time now. And so I think that, it's for anybody who's looking at what career they want to get into, it's not hard to see that teaching in North Carolina has become a much less desirable career prospect. And so, there have been some small steps taken by the legislature to work on pay, not nearly enough, but some small steps. But in general, that trend is still there. And so, unless we take real action to make teaching a more attractive career proposition, I think we're going to continue to see our young people, choose careers where they can be more comfortable.
Well, we saw the same crisis happen in the medical profession some years ago with nursing shortages. And all of a sudden, guess what was happening? As we have fewer and fewer nurses, the nurses that were in the field were able to get higher and higher salaries. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of ironic that the very people who are undermining the profession don't get the long economic view that as the supply becomes shorter, yes, there's going to be some consequences for some of our school systems who aren't going to be able to have certified, experienced teachers in their classroom. It's become a bidding war for those great teachers, for those certified teachers, those successful teachers. And in the long run, we're just going to drive up the costs of the profession. So I don't want it to happen that way, but it may be that where we're heading for is as we see the competition for educators grow and the supply shrink, we're going to be in a situation where school systems and the General Assembly included are going to have to pay a lot more money to obtain the best teachers that are available in our county. Now, I would like to hope that that's not the doom and gloom way to get to it, but this is what happened in the nursing profession. So all of a sudden, there were big incentives to get people into the nursing programs. There were big incentives to get them, to fast track some of their training programs. And there was a big push to vary their scheduling and how they could get their hours. And in the long run, we saw an improvement in pay and improvement in the profession of nursing. But it was a very painful 5 or 6 or 7 years there in which a lot of hospitals were doing subpar care. A lot of patients weren't able to receive what they needed. And I see the same thing happening with our children. I see that the shortage has already made class sizes bloom in high schools, where we're having a hard time getting math and science teachers. We're getting class sizes of 35 and 40 and 50 kids in a class. Right. We're seeing K through 5. There's some 5th grade classes that teachers have been sending me their class enrollments. They've got 35 kids in the 5th grade. So we're going to suffer some consequences for our kids. And I guess, how does this all fit in with the serving the common good, making sure that the community has a well-educated labor force to fix our cars, to be our nurses, to be our teachers, to be our doctors, to be our mechanics? How do we get back to and make that a reality again, Justin?
Well, I mean, I think there's 2 things. There's the old adage, if you don't like the policy, change the policymakers. I think that's part of it, and that's been real difficult in North Carolina because of the electoral maps. So hopefully we're making some progress along those lines, and we'll have some districts where we can actually have a fair election. And because I think it's pretty clear that North Carolinians want us to be doing more for public education, and there hasn't been a lot of polling, but the polling that I've seen has consistently by the public has consistently said that that the public would like to see more support for our public schools. And unfortunately, we've got people who are making the decisions who have different priorities. The other thing I would say is that I think we're going to see the Leandro report come out pretty soon, and so there's a little bit of hope that the courts maybe will be able to pressure our state legislators to live up to their constitutional obligation to provide quality education to our children, because they're not, and the Constitution requires that they do.
tell everybody just 2 sentences what that case is about. It is about underfunding, inequity and funding. Do you want to just say a few things about that?
Well, just that, the simple version is just that, it was a decision made in response to a lawsuit alleging that, that the state wasn't living up to its constitutional obligation and basically was underfunding public education. And but the legislature has never abided by the ruling in that case, and so.
And so we see that some of the consequences of that are that there are some school districts who are able to make up some of the lacking of funding and local funds, and then there's other districts who have no tax base.
Right.
So that, and not only are we underfunding all schools, but the consequences for poor, rural, smaller
Right.
counties have been devastating. And it's really true that you can live in a small rural county or a low income tax-based county and not have the same educational opportunity as you do in a wealthier county. Like
Absolutely, and for some of those counties that are right up along the border with Virginia, teachers unfortunately have to make the right decision for their families, and they'll just jump right over the border and teach where they can make a lot more money. And so we've got to get our legislature to actually step up and do what they're supposed to be doing. So we'll see. I'm not sure when that report's going to be released, but hopefully it'll be soon, and we'll see what happens after that. It's as educators, we keep fighting, and we keep hoping that we're going to turn the corner at some point, and so that hope is there. It's tough, but it's there.
Well, people like you being in the classroom and in a school have got to give. That's a good marketing right here. I hope that a lot of parents in Mecklenburg will see this webinar and say, hey, I want that guy for my teacher. I want to go to that school because of your passion and your commitment. So we'll kind of end on these 2 questions. I would say, tell parents, what do you wish that parents better understood about public education today? If you were talking to a lot of parents out here tonight who are watching this, what do you want parents to understand?
I think I want them to understand that that we're doing the best we can in the system that we're in, and we're not always seeing the results that we want to. But we've got great teachers in North Carolina who by and large have stuck with it through a very difficult decade, and we're still here. But at some point, in terms of resources and in terms of policy, things are going to need to change for us to be able to provide what we want to provide to our children. Okay,
and parents have a big role in that in terms of understanding, getting involved, being advocates, being voters, all those kind of things. And then on your last words, what do you wish you could tell lawmakers if they're watching us tonight and they're listening in later? What's the one thing you would wish they would really understand about the art of instruction and about the needs in our schools? What would be your appeal to our legislators?
I guess I'd just reiterate what I said before, which is that the goal of public education is to open doors of opportunity for our children, and and we need our policymakers to be a part of that, opening those doors of opportunity instead of, opening way too many doors, but they're all too small for anyone to get through.
Right. So, and I think that the fact that you're so engaged in critiquing your own profession, sharing the good suggestions about your own profession, talking to parents, talking to legislators, I think that that's what it's going to take for us to make a difference in the conversation we're having. I will say, in a positive note, I have an opportunity to talk to a lot of business owners, a lot of business people, realtors, Chamber of Commerce folks. They are great fans of our public school system. I'm also hoping that they continue to advocate and stand up for a strong public education system. When I talk to realtors, they say the first thing that everybody wants to know is, tell me about the schools. They want every community to have a great school so that they can live anywhere and have a great school. Chamber of Commerce tell me that the first thing every business that wants to locate or expand here says is, tell me about the labor force. What do I have, you know, what kind of educational opportunities for my own children, my families we move here have? What kind of opportunities for training a labor force do we have in the community? What opportunities do we have for higher ed? These are the kind of things. And so still, through all of the attacks on public education and the reform movement, we still have the very best bargain in town is your strong public school system, one system of strong schools. And I love that you always include in your conversations, Justin, that they should be integrated and inclusive, diverse, and that, you know, they should engage children and their parents to be a part of the answer to the education. So I really love that. And I want to thank you again tonight for being with us. I commend you for your heart, your passion. What a wonderful career you've had so far. How many years have you got in the system now, total years teaching?
This one's number 25 for me.
Number 25. Well, it's going to be a sad day if you retire because you look too young to be thinking about it.
No, I'm not thinking about it.
But I do think that that we need to show all those people who are high school seniors right now, look at Justin and look at what a great contribution he's made to public education. So thank you again, and good night to all our guests. I'll say in closing, you know the drill. We really want you to go to our website and join our newsletter, Public Schools First NC. We want you to follow us on Facebook. We post 6, 7, 8 times a day to keep you up to date and current with what's going on nationally, statewide, and locally in public education. We want our audience to be a part of the solution to make our public schools even stronger and even better. So thank all of you, and good night. And Justin, I think we can say have a nice break, right? Because you're on the beginning of a 4-day holiday.
That's right, everybody.
So enjoy yourself, and thank you for being with us tonight, Justin.
Thank you so much.
Look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right.
I'm going to come back to you one day to talk about Turkey and being on a reservation and teaching. I think that's fascinating.
Anytime.
Okay, bye-bye. Good night,
you.
everybody.